The US Navy F-18 Super Hornet screamed through the sky. It was April 28, 2025. The Super Hornet, armed with air-to-air missiles and bombs, was on a routine patrol over the Red Sea. The jet and its crew were part of a carrier air wing. The Super Hornet's crew scanned the skies for any sign of trouble. High above, hidden in the glare of the sun, a swarm of drones approached. These were heavily armed, advanced suicide drones. The lead drone locked its sensors onto the unsuspecting Super Hornet. In a flash, the sky erupted in fire and smoke. The explosion rocked the Super Hornet, a direct hit. The attack sent shockwaves through the American fleet. The Houthis had just struck a major blow. This was a dangerous escalation, an act of war. The Houthi attack was swift and devastating. It was not just one drone, but a whole wave. The American pilots, trained for traditional dogfights, were caught off guard. The drones, small and agile, were difficult to target. They swarmed the Super Hornet, their explosive payloads promising destruction. The Super Hornet's crew fought back. They were highly trained and experienced. Their training kicked in. The pilot, struggling to keep control of the damaged jet, took evasive action. The weapons systems officer fired the Super Hornet's countermeasures. Flares lit up the sky, throwing off the drone's targeting systems. But the drones kept coming. They were relentless. One by one they closed in, detonating their explosives in a desperate attempt to overwhelm the American fighter. The Super Hornet, its once sleek fuselage now scarred and burning, was in serious trouble. The crew, their voices tense over the radio, knew they were in a fight for their lives. The outcome of this battle, they realized, could have far-reaching consequences. It was not just about one Super Hornet. This was about the balance of power in a volatile region. News of the attack spread like wildfire. The US Navy, initially tight-lipped, confirmed the incident. They insisted that the Super Hornet had not been shot down. They claimed it had experienced a landing mishap after evading Houthi fire. The pilot and weapons system officer, they said, had ejected safely, but the damage was done. The Houthis, emboldened by their success, claimed victory. They boasted that they had driven the Americans back. The incident sent shockwaves through the region. In Washington, D.C., the mood was grim. The attack on the Super Hornet was a major embarrassment. It was a direct challenge to American power. President Trump, known for his hawkish stance, was under pressure to respond. Some called for retaliation. Others urged restraint. The incident threatened to unravel a fragile ceasefire. This ceasefire had been painstakingly negotiated by Omani diplomats. The ceasefire was meant to bring an end to years of fighting in Yemen. This fighting had killed tens of thousands of people and created one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Section 4. A History of Violence. The Houthi attack on the Super Hornet was not an isolated incident. It was part of a long and bloody conflict. The Houthis, a Shia Muslim group from northern Yemen, had been fighting the Yemeni government for years. The Houthis felt marginalized and excluded from power. They were determined to take control of their country. The conflict escalated in 2014 when the Houthis, backed by Iran, seized control of the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. Saudi Arabia, fearing Iranian influence in its southern neighbor, intervened militarily. The Saudis led a coalition of Arab states in a bombing campaign against the Houthis. The United States, a longtime ally of Saudi Arabia, provided logistical and intelligence support to the Saudi-led coalition. The U.S. saw the Houthis as Iranian proxies. The U.S. feared that Iran was trying to establish a foothold in the Arabian Peninsula. The U.S. was determined to counter Iranian influence in the region. The war in Yemen quickly turned into a proxy conflict. It was a bloody stalemate between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The U.S., though not directly involved in the fighting, found itself drawn deeper into the quagmire. Section 5. The Truman Incident. The attack on the Super Hornet was not the first time the Houthis had targeted American forces. In 2019, Houthi missiles struck Saudi oil facilities, causing major disruptions. The U.S. blamed Iran for the attacks. Houthi forces fired missiles at U.S. Navy warships in the Red Sea. They harassed commercial shipping in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a vital choke point for global trade. The Houthis also launched drone attacks on targets in Saudi Arabia and the UAE. The U.S. responded with airstrikes targeting Houthi military facilities, but the American involvement did little to quell the violence. The war in Yemen raged on. It became a humanitarian catastrophe. The attack on the Super Hornet in 2025 was a major escalation. It threatened to drag the US further into the conflict, raising the specter of a wider war in the Middle East. Section 6. A fragile peace. In the aftermath of the attack, the US and the Houthis agreed to a ceasefire. This truce was once again mediated by Oman. The ceasefire was fragile, but it held. The US suspended offensive military operations against the Houthis. The Houthis, in turn, agreed to halt their attacks on American forces and their allies. The ceasefire was a welcome respite, but it was only a temporary solution. The underlying issues that had fueled the conflict remained unresolved. The Houthis were still determined to control Yemen. The Saudis were still determined to prevent Iranian influence in their backyard. The ceasefire did, however, create an opportunity for diplomacy. The US, under the Biden administration, had shifted its policy toward the Yemen conflict. The Biden administration ended US support for the Saudi-led coalition's offensive operations. The Biden administration also appointed a special envoy to Yemen. This envoy was tasked with trying to broker a peace deal between the warring parties. The peace talks were complex and difficult, but they offered a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, there was a real chance to end the war in Yemen. Section 7. A dangerous future. The attack on the US Navy Super Hornet in April 2025 was a wake-up call. It showed that even the most powerful military in the world is vulnerable. It also highlighted the growing threat posed by drones. Drones are cheap and effective weapons. They are increasingly being used by state and non-state actors alike. The incident also underscored the volatility of the Middle East. The region is riven by conflict and instability. The US has been drawn into many of these conflicts. The US has struggled to extricate itself. The US Houthi ceasefire remained in effect as of May 2025, but the situation remained tense. The risk of a new escalation was high. The future of Yemen and the wider region remained uncertain. The attack on the Super Hornet was a reminder that the US must carefully weigh the risks and benefits of military intervention. The US must also find new ways to counter the threat posed by drones. The US must work to resolve the underlying conflicts that are fueling instability in the Middle East.